Most people don't set out to destroy their own lives, but the road to ruin is paved with tiny, almost imperceptible steps. Anonymous. You don't wake up one morning and decide to betray everything you've built. That's not how it happens. It begins with something small, a look, a moment, a thought that lingers longer than it should, and before you know it, you're standing at the edge of something you never thought you'd consider. But let's not talk about betrayal just yet. Let's talk about the quiet hunger that leads to it. Imagine this, a woman sitting in her kitchen late at night. The house is quiet, her husband asleep upstairs. Her phone lights up, a message from someone who isn't her partner. She hesitates, then opens it. Just a joke, just a meme, just something different. And for a moment, just a brief moment, she smiles in a way she hasn't in years. What most people don't understand is that emotional detachment never begins with intention. It begins with absence, the absence of being noticed, the absence of feeling chosen, the absence of being seen. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as a role, but as a woman. In the beginning of every marriage, there is presence. There are stolen glances across dinner tables, hands brushing during walks, words that feel like home. But time changes things. The glances become glances away. The silence fills with logistics. The warmth becomes routine. And then invisibility sets in. She's still there, still cooking, cleaning, keeping the pieces together. But she's no longer seen. The Stoics warned of this kind of drift. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And yet, what happens when that suffering becomes real? When the imagination of being loved differently becomes more vivid than the love she receives? You see, temptation doesn't need to knock loudly. It only needs to find a crack in the foundation. This isn't about infidelity. It's about identity. And when someone begins to feel like a background character in their own life, the first person who makes them feel like the lead again becomes dangerously magnetic. So here's the truth. The most powerful decisions in life are made in the quietest moments, in the stillness, in the shadows, in the in-between. And if we don't anchor ourselves to our values, if we don't guard the inner temple, those quiet moments become entry points for chaos. This isn't about judging anyone. It's about seeing clearly. Because clarity is power, and presence, real, grounded, attentive presence, is what stops the drift before it becomes a fall. Shall we go deeper? We are not held back by the love we didn't receive in the past, but by the love we failed to give in the present. Marianne Williamson. In the early stages of a relationship, love is loud. It dances through late-night conversations, handwritten notes, stolen kisses, spontaneous laughter. Everything feels alive. Both people are seen, not for what they do, but for who they are. But over time, the volume lowers, not because love disappears, but because life takes over. Schedules replace spontaneity. Responsibilities replace romance. The depth once felt in each interaction is slowly replaced by shallow routines. Dishes, bills, errands, sleep. And somewhere in that monotony, she starts to feel invisible. Not unloved, just unseen. This is the first crack, the unspoken void. Not all married women fall into it, but many stand at its edge. And those who do aren't seeking escape. They're seeking recognition, a reminder that they still matter, that they're still alive beneath the layers of duty. Stoicism teaches us to focus not on what is outside our control, but on what is within. And yet, emotional connection, the presence of being noticed, appreciated, desired, is something that withers when neglected. A woman may sit across from her husband at dinner and smile. She may nod during a conversation about work or the kids, but deep inside she may be wondering, when was the last time she felt truly seen? Not for her role, but for her. This is where danger creeps in. Because validation, like oxygen, doesn't need much to ignite something inside. A compliment from a stranger, a conversation where she feels heard, a moment where anyone, makes her feel interesting again. Not beautiful, not useful, not responsible, but captivating. And suddenly, that tiny spark feels like breath after suffocation. The Stoics warned us of illusion. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But how do you react when the illusion begins to feel more nourishing than your reality? The greatest threat to a commitment is not conflict, it's indifference. Not fighting, but fading. And when fading becomes the norm, anything that restores color feels like salvation. She may never intend to act on it. She may never cross a line. But if the attention makes her feel alive, while her daily life makes her feel numb, her heart begins to shift its allegiance, not because she's a villain, but because she's human. So what's the remedy? It isn't control, it isn't suspicion, it's presence. Not performative, not forced, but real. To look again, to listen again, to remember again. The Stoic knows that what we neglect decays, not out of malice, but out of nature, and what we water flourishes. The mind will always find a way to justify what the heart has already decided. Anonymity. She tells herself it's innocent, a message here, a laugh there, a conversation that feels just a little too personal, but not too far. It's harmless, she insists. But the truth is, she's already begun the most dangerous journey, the journey of internal justification. You see, betrayal doesn't begin with action, it begins with permission. And the first person we lie to is always ourselves. I'm not doing anything wrong. If he appreciated me more, I wouldn't need this. This is just for me. It doesn't affect my marriage. Cognitive dissonance, psychologists call it, the uncomfortable tension between what we believe and what we do. And when that tension becomes too much to bear, the mind creates stories to soften the guilt. Seneca warned us, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. But here, the adversity is not external, it's internal. It's the war between values and desire, between loyalty and longing. And when desire wins, the mind becomes its advocate. She compartmentalizes, she reframes, she shifts blame. Each thought, each rationalization is like laying down a stepping stone toward a line she never meant to cross. And once that emotional boundary breaks, when secrets replace transparency, when feelings once shared with her partner are now shared with someone else, the betrayal has already begun. Not in flesh, but in heart. This is what makes emotional affairs so insidious. They don't scream, they whisper, they masquerade as connection, as escape, as just someone to talk to. But deep connection doesn't need touch to become dangerous. It only needs secrecy. And once secrets enter a marriage, trust begins to erode from the inside. The Stoics urged us to live in alignment, not with the world's noise, but with our own integrity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But how often do we blur the lines when something feels good? How often do we let the heart decide and let the mind write the script to make it okay? This isn't about condemning her. This is about understanding the fragile architecture of temptation. The way it builds, not with storms, but with soft winds. The way it convinces us that what we're doing isn't wrong until we can no longer remember where the line used to be. So the lesson here is not about her. It's about all of us. How often do we abandon our principles, not with a leap, but with a shuffle? How often do we excuse the small cracks until the whole structure begins to collapse? To live a Stoic life is not to be immune to temptation. It is to be awake within it, to catch the mind in its self-deception, to pause before the drift becomes distance. Because the heart can feel anything, but the mind must decide what we become. The chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they are too strong to be broken. Samuel Johnson. She doesn't even notice the shift at first. The first late-night message, the first secret she doesn't share, the first smile she hides when her husband walks into the room. It's not an affair, she tells herself, but each act is a rehearsal, each omission a rehearsal, each justification a brick in a new house she's building without even realizing it. This is the moment where imagination becomes ritual, where the game turns real. And the scariest part? She doesn't even feel it happening. In Stoic thought, this is the realm of the threshold, the point where the self begins to lose its shape, not through violence, through repetition. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. But this truth has a darker twin. So is betrayal. The more she entertains the connection, the more it feels normal. expected, even deserved. Each message becomes easier, each excuse more refined. The guilt that once stung now whispers like an old friend, comforting her with rationalizations she's rehearsed 100 times. I deserve this. He stopped trying. No one's getting hurt. But someone is getting hurt, even if they don't know it yet, because something sacred is unraveling. And once the sacred becomes casual, it's only a matter of time before reality shatters. The Stoics taught that a well-lived life requires vigilance, not paranoia, but presence, not suspicion, but self-awareness. Epictetus reminds us, no man is free who is not master of himself, but she is no longer master. Not of her feelings, not of her actions, not of the path she's now walking. She has become a passenger in her own choices, carried by a tide she once thought she could control. And that's the true danger. Not the man she's texting, not the moment she hides, but the slow erosion of the self until the woman she was is no longer the woman she sees in the mirror. And yet, it all feels addictive, because it is. Neuroscience shows us that emotional and romantic stimulation triggers the same reward centers in the brain as addictive drugs. This isn't about love. It's about the chemical rush of feeling desired, wanted, chosen, even if just for a moment. And once that feeling takes root, it becomes the new compass. Every choice bends toward it. So she tells herself one last time, I'll stop tomorrow. I'll end it next week. Just one more conversation. But weeks become months, and eventually she's no longer playing a game. She's living a double life. Not always physically, but emotionally, fully. The Stoic asks not what feels good, but what is right, because pleasure is fleeting. But character, or the loss of it, echoes through every corner of our lives. She stopped seeing her marriage as her home. Her husband became the outsider. The real connection, the real intimacy, it lived elsewhere, unknown. This is the final transformation, not when she sleeps with another man, but when she stops belonging to the life she built. By now, the emotional line isn't blurred, it's been crossed and forgotten. The marriage hasn't ended legally, but spiritually, emotionally, it has already fractured. In the mind of a Stoic, this is the collapse of alignment. She may still go through the motions, prepare dinner, smile during family outings, attend social events as a wife. But internally, the loyalty is no longer present. The husband becomes the one on the outside, and the man who was once just a friend, he becomes the emotional center, the place where she feels most herself, where she feels most alive. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." But what happens when all her thoughts are now centered around someone else? The betrayal isn't just of her partner, it's of her identity. She no longer sees herself as the faithful wife. She sees herself as the woman who deserves this new feeling because of all she has given, all she has tolerated, all she has missed. And in that mindset, even wrong begins to feel righteous. I gave this marriage everything. He stopped seeing me years ago. This new connection is what I should have had all along. That's the final descent. When justification hardens into belief, and belief becomes a wall, one that truth, logic, or remorse can no longer penetrate. The Stoics warned of this hardening of the soul. Seneca spoke of the danger of becoming a stranger to yourself, of abandoning the discipline that keeps your mind from being ruled by impulses. Here, the impulse has become the new compass. But no one else sees it. Not yet. She smiles in photos, holds his hand at dinners, plays the part perfectly. But inside, she's gone. And this is the silent tragedy of emotional betrayal. It leaves no visible wound, but it hollows out a relationship from the inside until there's nothing left to salvage. The world will only know when the collapse becomes visible, when the divorce papers are signed, when the truth surfaces. But by then, the damage is already done. So what can we learn from this? Not just about others, but about ourselves. That love is not something to be assumed. That attention is not something to withhold until it's too late. That presence, true, grounded presence, is the only way to keep two souls from drifting into parallel loneliness. The Stoic walks the path of awareness, not paranoia, not control, but presence. Because once connection fades, the heart starts to look elsewhere. And by the time the truth is spoken, the goodbye was already whispered long ago in silence. You can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. Ayn Rand. Now we arrive at the harshest truth of all. Some married women don't fall into temptation because they want to cheat. They fall because they want to feel again, to feel seen, to feel chosen, to feel something that was once vibrant and now feels distant, buried under years of quiet neglect. And when they find it, even in fleeting moments, walking away becomes impossible. Not because they're cruel, not because they're heartless, but because the feeling feels irreplaceable. This is the final layer of the descent, when the emotional connection with someone outside the marriage begins to feel more real than the life she's living. She tells herself, I can't go back to feeling numb. This new connection, it brought me back to life. And with that belief, everything shifts. The marriage becomes the illusion. The affair becomes the reality. The Stoics never promised that life would protect us from such complexity. What they offered instead was the discipline to see clearly and the strength to act with integrity even when it hurts. Epictetus taught that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. But this woman, like so many others, has surrendered her freedom to a feeling she can no longer control. She thinks she's chasing liberation, but in truth, she's entangled herself in a new kind of captivity, one built not with chains, but with emotions too powerful to walk away from. This is where it becomes irreversible, because now she's convinced that this feeling, this man, this moment, is something her marriage could never offer again. And when that belief hardens into certainty, she stops searching for answers within. She stops trying. She stops hoping. She simply detaches. And the tragedy isn't that she fell. The tragedy is that no one saw her falling, that no one noticed the slow fade, that no one asked what was missing until it was too late. So what is the Stoic response? It's to pay attention, not to control, not to manipulate, but to stay present. To choose our partners every day, not just with actions, but with awareness. To recognize the silent signals before they become screams. To hold space for the emotions that rarely get spoken. To tend to love not as a possession, but as a garden, one that withers without care, but blooms with presence. In the end, temptation is not the enemy. Neglect is, and the antidote isn't punishment, it's presence. Because the quiet attention you give someone today may be the very thing that prevents them from seeking it elsewhere tomorrow, Chuck. Self-respect is the fruit of discipline. The sense of dignity grows with the ability to say no to oneself. Abraham Joshua Heschel. She didn't set out to break a vow. She set out to feel alive again. But in doing so, she crossed a line, not always with her body, but with her heart. And once the heart gives itself away, the rest often follows. The world is quick to point fingers, to label, to shame. But Stoicism teaches us to look deeper, not to excuse, but to understand. Because only with understanding can we see clearly, and only with clarity can we act with wisdom. What happened in her mind happened quietly, slowly, tragically. And it didn't begin with betrayal. It began with disconnection. That is where the true danger lives, in the spaces where we stop showing up for each other, where we assume love will sustain itself, where presence is replaced with performance. And when love is no longer felt, not because it isn't there, but because it isn't expressed, the human heart wanders. The Stoics did not view emotion as weakness. They saw unmanaged emotion as the threat. That is why they taught discipline, not to become cold, but to stay grounded, present, anchored. Because when you stop tending the fire, even the strongest bond grows cold. So let this story be a mirror, not to judge others, but to reflect on ourselves. Ask yourself, are you still seeing the people in your life, or just looking at them? Are you showing up with intention, or coasting on assumption? Are you choosing connection, or waiting for it to fade? This isn't just about marriage. It's about integrity, about alignment. To live in alignment means to act in accordance with your values, even when no one is watching, even when it would be easier not to. It means understanding that love is not kept alive through grand gestures, but through quiet presence, daily choices, gentle awareness. And it means holding yourself to a higher standard, not because the world demands it, but because your soul deserves it. The Stoic path is not about resisting temptation through fear. It's about transcending it through clarity. Because the greatest strength is not found in domination, but in discipline. Not in control of others, but in control of yourself. So if you've ever felt the drift in yourself, in someone you love, don't wait for the collapse. Rebuild the bridge. Say the words. Notice what's been overlooked. Because sometimes the smallest act of presence is the loudest act of love. And in a world full of distractions, the one who pays attention is the one who heals. This is not a story about infidelity. It's a story about what happens when we stop showing up. And it's a reminder that the quietest betrayals often begin with the things we think don't matter, but they do. They always do. Dahuantan. Tom do zai dat mun gentu.